Ever since modding support was added to Polybridge 3, I've had a challenge I've always wanted to try. One of the functions you can use lets you set the strength for each material in the game, and I wanted to see if it was possible to beat the entire first world of Polybridge 3 using only 20% strength materials. To give myself a place to start though, without all my bridges immediately falling apart, I wanted to start out with just a normal game of Polybridge first, and try to get to the top 1% of strongest bridges for all 10 levels before turning the mod on. So starting out with the first level here, you can see the first thing I'm doing is loading up my original solution. Now ultimately, this isn't too complicated of a design. I got 2 truss bridges here, and I lowered the trusses on the second one to save some cost. This though was not going to be winning any awards, and I could see already I was the bottom 20% in terms of strength. So I decided to start over, and what I wanted to try doing was switching out the first bridge to instead be an underarch design. Now this can be a lot more cost effective, and I was hoping it'd be a little bit stronger as well, but you can see here, once I got all my supports in place, it was actually doing a little bit worse than before. Now ultimately though, since this is the shorter bridge, it really shouldn't be the biggest problem, so I decided just to make this another truss bridge, but you can see I'm making the trusses a lot shorter. Ultimately here, I just want to make this as strong as it needs to be in order to not be the weakest link. Now for a little extra strength for not a lot of cost, I wanted to try adding these 2 wall braces as well, and these did seem to help me out a little bit here. So with that, I wanted to copy this over to the other side, and you can see me adapting it now for the slightly longer bridge. Trying it out, I could tell there was a lot of stress on that middle beam though, so what I decided to do was raise up the truss a little bit to hopefully make it a little stronger. Now this design, I was already doing quite a bit better than before. I was at the top 46%, but to hopefully make this a bit stronger, you can see what I'm doing is putting down some more under supports here, although this was using a lot of extra material. And as it turns out too, they didn't really end up being all that strong either. So for this level, it just seemed like the best way to go was to raise up the truss as much as I could. Now trying this out, already I was top 22%, but to make this even better, I wanted to try raising up the truss on that second bridge to see if this would have much of an effect. Now this did improve things quite a bit here. You can see I'm getting the top 2%, but to get that top 1%, I was gonna have to do a little bit better, and I realized an easy thing I could do was to trim down the first bridge a little bit and try to double up the trusses on that second bridge. And by doing this here, I did have to lower them a little bit, but overall, the stress was down quite a bit, and you can see here, I got my first top 1%. So starting out here, this wasn't too bad yet, but the second level was already gonna be quite a bit harder. And you can see pretty much it's just a longer version of the first level here, and my original solution was pretty close to the limit of what I could hold. So I decided to double up my truss again, but in order to keep it under cost, I had to make it really trimmed down. This wasn't ideal, and I could already tell by how thin this was, it wasn't really gonna do great. Now finally, after saving a few extra dollars, I was able to run the car across, and this actually ended up being worse than the bridge I had before. So I decided to delete off those trusses, and you can see I'm going for a bottom arch. This didn't really work great last time, but I think it's just because I didn't have enough length to really make it work. So you can see here, I tried supporting it up, and while it's definitely very stressed out, at the very least it did the trick. Now with a little bit of tweaking here, I was able to better distribute the load, and you can see I'm able to keep it down way more than before. Instead of being in the 80%, I was more in the 40s, and this is already top 2%. And once again, just by moving around some pieces to make it a little bit smoother for that load, I was able to get the car across here, and you can see I was top 1%. Now seeing though as I'm at 40% stress right now, which is double the limit I'm gonna have to deal with the mod, I wasn't quite sure what I was gonna do with that. Now that's a problem for the future though, and I decided to move on to the next level here, which is even longer than the last one, but we get a rock in the middle this time. Now you can see my previous bridge wasn't terrible, but there was a lot of stress in the middle, so one optimization I was thinking of was curving the road down towards the rock, and this lets me brace against it a lot more easily, and the van kind of just slams down on it and breaks everything. Now fortunately, with a little bit of extra bracing, I was able to prevent that from happening, and you can see me trying to finish off the back half of the bridge. This is pretty much the same thing here, and you can see it just took some basic trussing, but to prevent the van from slamming down to the first bridge, I wanted to try adding in a road. One of the biggest optimizations you can make in these sorts of challenges is trying to reduce shock forces, and by adding in that road to slow the van down, I was already doing quite a bit better. Now I realized though, by shortening the road like this, I can actually get the van to get on top of it, and this means that it gradually gets onto that slope instead of slamming on it. This ended up doing better than that previous bridge, and you can see I actually decided to redesign the second bridge to be even smoother. Now with this design here, with just a few modifications to keep everything together as well well as I could, I decided to give this a shot, and you can see here, this was already top 1%. So moving on to the next level now, this one's even longer than the last one, but this time we get steel. Now that was gonna be really important here, and you can see getting the school bus across, I don't end up doing too badly. This design though was very overcomplicated, and I decided to delete it off, and you can see I'm going for another arch design. This one's very similar to the other one, although with the steel I can make it a lot more effectively. Now with this, I ended up getting top 34%, which wasn't great, but you can see here, just by separating out the two sections of the bridge, this ended up doing a lot better. In fact, with pretty much no modifications, I was able to get to the top 1% here. So with that, I decided to move on, and you can see here, we get a decently long bridge with a support in the middle and with steel. Now this is already top 7%, and just by making some things a little bit longer here, I was actually able to get the ambulance across and pretty easily get this to top 1%. Now so far, this really hasn't been too bad at all, and for this next level here, I get a super long bridge to make. Now for this one, you can see what I ended up doing is making two sections of bridge, and I have a limited amount of steel that I can use to hold it all together. Now pretty much the plan here was to use the steel to hold up each section of the bridge, and to use the wood to keep each section together. Now ultimately, I figured I could get pretty far just by using some nice tall trusses, and giving this a shot here, it's not too bad. I was already top 6%, and in order to get the top 1%, I pretty much just did some minor optimizations here, and ended up using my steel a lot more effectively. Now also by using some wood diamonds here to replace some steel, that ended up doing me a lot of good, and after just a few minutes, I already got the top 1%. So with that, moving on to the 7th level now, you can see what we got here is a bridge that requires a forced dip, and in order to make this work, I decided just to use a lot of steel to hold this all together. Now, I would have thought that this is a pretty standard solution, but given this a shot here, it seemed to work fine, and not only that, I was already top 13%. I noticed when the police car came on this, it kind of slammed down on it, so what I wanted to try doing is using my little road trick from before to even out that load, but it seemed like the pickup truck really wanted to either stop or knock this road over. So another approach I saw was to lay a road on top of the police car to slow it down, and I also evened out the first few roads to make it a little bit more gradual. And this did seem to help a lot, and with this design, I was able to get the police car across, and you can see that I had my top 1%. So moving on to the 8th level, this one's called Over the Boat, and my strategy here was to try to go over the boat. So I tried building a little bit of an arch there, and you can see I'm using some steel to hopefully support all this up. Now just a few extra connections here to hold this all together. I got the truck across, and you can see this was already top 3%. Now honestly, I kind of got lazy with this one, and considering I was already at 40%, I realized I was going to need a fundamentally different design anyway to get to 20%, so I decided to procrastinate coming up with a better solution on this one, and move on to the next level. This is a pretty unremarkable level overall. The only real problem I had here is that big drop off at the front, but to solve this, you can see I made that slope a little bit more gradual than it was before, and I'm also barely hitting that star. This means I have to drop as little as possible, which should reduce the load on the bridge. Now afterwards, you can see me just using a lot of wood to support this all up, and I'm using some wood diamonds here to hopefully be a little bit stronger. And this did seem to help out a lot, and you can see the van ended up getting all the way across here, and already this was the top 1%. So now, for the final level in this world, I needed to get both cars across at the same time, and while this one kinda looks bad, it really isn't since there's a lot of support in the middle, and you can see there I'm using a technique where I'm supporting the steel directly against the rock. This saves me a lot of cost, and just with this, I was able to get top 1%, but with at least something to base my future designs off of, what I wanted to try doing was going to the main menu, creating my 20% materials mod, and seeing how my bridges would do. So after getting that mod turned on, once again, I loaded up the first level here, and trying this out, it didn't really go very well. And this first bridge was a little bit too weak, and I realized I was gonna need to strengthen this up. And to do that, you can see me go with this truss design again, and this was barely holding together. And the second longer bridge didn't stand a chance at all, and it also immediately broke. And I did end up getting this to work here by putting two super tall trusses together, and while I did get the Vespa across, I was now over budget, and while I didn't necessarily want to get every bridge under budget, for anything that was close, I wanted to try to push it under, and I started on that here. I deleted the bottom truss, but now this was just way too weak. Now an idea I had though was trying to curve the roads a little bit, and it's just that they can help support themselves as well. Now to hold these all in place, I tried using some bottom pieces of wood here, and while at first I didn't support them very well, giving this another shot here, it actually almost seemed to work. Now I realized the better approach is actually to separate this into two separate sections, and by doing that, I can really get this to distribute a lot better here, and while it's very close to to not working, I am able to get the Vespa across here, and with this, I'm able to beat this level with about $2,000 saved. So that was tough, but this next one's gonna be even worse since the bridge immediately falls apart. Now, this is what I was kind of trying to avoid earlier in the video, so what I wanted to try doing here was deleting off this bridge and once again going for my curved road design. If I can get these roads to help me out with supporting them, it would be really nice here, but overall, I want to have a pretty similar support structure on the bottom. And I was getting a little messy with the supports, which I didn't really love, and you can see trying this out, it almost is able to hold itself up. Now, I tried replacing some of the supports with roads since they're actually a little bit stronger than wood, and giving this a shot, it actually held up a lot longer. This time, the car was able to approach the bridge before it then fell down. So I tried using some extra roads here, and this time you can see I'm getting a lot further on the bridge, although it still ends up breaking on me. Now, you'd think at this point I could just replace all the wood with roads, but there is a huge issue with that. The roads are a lot heavier than wood, and if I add a lot more of them, this whole thing's not gonna be able to support itself. So I was trying to use these wood diamonds wherever I could, since they're actually a little bit stronger than the road. Trying this out though, I kinda had a massive issue. This piece of road ended up breaking on me, and ordinarily, I'd try to make this into a road diamond to give it some more strength, but since it's pushed up against the edge of the island, I just don't have the space to do that. Now, I realized though, if I delete off the road, and if I instead use chains of road like this, I can actually get a similar kind of effect. Now, they don't share equally like the diamonds do, but it does make it just a little bit stronger before it ends up breaking. And there's still a lot more that I need to reinforce here, but I tried using as many wood diamonds as I could instead of using roads. This ended up helping me out quite a bit here, and eventually you can see I'm able to get the golf cart over into the middle and just barely not fracture the bridge. So I was gonna consider that a win and move on to this next level here, where my top 1% solution isn't even close to making this work. In fact, I actually decided to abandon my approach where I was getting close to the rock, because I ended up realizing that smoothing out the ride was so much more important than getting some slightly better bracing locations. Now, you can see that I'm using a lot of the same techniques from the last level in order to keep this all together, and trying it out, it wasn't too bad, but it did break towards the middle, and I noticed that the weak point was this diamond right here. This provided me with a really nice opportunity to break out one of my favorite techniques, which is putting a diamond on top of a diamond like this. With this, I was actually able to get quite a bit further and finally get to the supports of that middle section. Trying this out though, I needed a fundamentally different design here, and you can see I'm going for something where I'm bracing more against the rock. Now, this was looking a lot better, although it did still end up breaking on me. So to fix this, I tried straightening it out, and you can see here I'm using roads instead. This was closer, but there's still just a lot of stress here, so I kind of just kept upgrading things, and now I'm using diamonds, and with this, I was able to get almost all the way to the other side. With a few extra diamonds here, I was able to get to the other supports, but this was just a little bit too much for them. Now, I realized the last time I copied these was when I first started the level, so I copied them over once again, and now with this better design on that side, you can see the van's able to get over, and while it's looking bad for a second there, I'm able to touch the flag, and that lets me beat the level. So next up is the steel level, and the good news is that the bridge actually was holding together, but the bad news is that as soon as the bus went on it, it instantly broke. The issue is right over here on this wall support, and in order to fix that, I had to use my same chain design from before to distribute that load a bit more evenly. This did seem to help out quite a bit, although really the solution here was just going to be a lot of extra diamonds. Now, one issue though is at some point I realized that the bus was actually breaking this road piece first, and that's an issue since I can't just directly replace it with steel. So my solution here was to get rid of the road, but to replace it with a slightly shorter one in its place. Now, I also added in a piece of steel to where that road used to be. Now, with an extra road piece in between, it almost looks the same as before, but now it's that steel piece taking the entire brunt of the force, and this was looking pretty good. So next, I went ahead here, added in some more diamonds, and copied this over to the other side, and trying this out, it almost worked, although you can see that this ended up breaking. Now, as I was trying to buff that up a little bit more, eventually I ran into the problem where I was trying to use more than 2 times the budget. The game just won't allow this at all, so that was going to be a hard cap on how much money I could spend. So one improvement that I saw was changing out the center of these diamonds from steel to road. These don't really take a lot of stress, but this does save me a little bit of money, and with a few extra modifications here to make this as cheap as possible, I was finally able to make both sides exactly the same. And with this, while I am getting to 99% stress, I was able to get the bus across here, and this let me beat this level. But now, moving on to level 5 here, My 1% solution didn't do horribly, but I could definitely tell some improvements I could make. I wanted to keep the same straight road, but one of the biggest things I saw was just changing it so it braces against the rocks a lot more often. And you can see me making this all up here, and the advantage of bracing against the rocks is I can get straight up and down supports, which should be as strong as possible. Now, trying this out, it did break, but with just an extra piece of steel on the side here, I was able to prop this up against a rock, and this actually did really well. Now, if I keep moving in the middle here, I do get a few more breaks, but again, just moving some stuff over a little bit, this ended up seeming to work pretty well here, and I almost got to the end before the steel ended up breaking. So for this, I decided just to double it up like this, and giving this a shot now, it's able to distribute the load a little bit, and this is more than enough for it to get all the way to the other side. And looking at this though, I figured I could get this under budget, and the first thing I wanted to try doing was getting rid of some of the extra supports that weren't really necessary. And ultimately, it functions exactly the same, so that was a pretty good optimization. Now I could do a similar thing with this piece of steel here, and you can see while it doesn't quite reach the rock, it's able to fall down slightly, and it still ends up mostly working. Now next, I could actually simplify this right side of the bridge a lot here by reducing the length of one of the pieces of steel. This ended up working great, and I figured the rest of the cost I could trim down just from these side supports. And with a little bit of tuning here, I was able to get this all to work, and you can see now I'm able to touch the flag and beat that level. And the super long bridge level, I thought it was gonna go bad immediately, but honestly I got pretty far before things ended up breaking. Now you can see here, it ended up being this long section of trussing in the middle that ended up breaking on me, so I decided just to reinforce that by using a bottom truss as well, and this actually did seem to work. Now unfortunately, the support for that section did end up breaking, and to try to fix that, I wanted to use some extra wood to hold this all together. This wasn't quite enough though, and it still ended up breaking on me. Now I could tell that the angle of that steel piece was probably the issue, so what I wanted to try doing here was adding in some wood and making a wood diamond like this, using my piece of steel to hold up that wood diamond and flipping it around to support it again. This seemed to do the trick here, and now moving on to the second bridge, the only issue I had was the main supports ended up breaking on me, so to fix that, I tried lowering them a little bit here, and you can see that it really didn't change much. Now ultimately, the issue is I need to add more steel over there, so I tried reducing it in other parts of the bridge, and trying this out now, it was clearly improved, but still needed just a little bit more strength. So to hopefully get it there, I tried using a wood diamond, and I used the steel piece on that as well to make it a little stronger. This seemed to do the trick, and by doubling up the reinforcement over here on the right side, I was able to get the car across. This design though was only 8% over budget, and so I wanted to see if I could trim this down a little bit, and one thing that I saw was replacing the center truss with a single piece. The wood was a little bit too weak for the task, but I could tell that the road was a lot closer. This actually did end up working here, and it saved me quite a bit. I realized I could do the same thing for these wood diamonds, and by trimming down these trusses quite a bit here, I was able to just barely get the car over there, and you can see here it's able to support in the middle as well and get to the other side. I still had another $2,000 to shave though, but by getting rid of some more trusses and replacing them with single pieces of wood, and also by replacing some steel with some wood diamonds here, I was able to get the budget down quite a bit, and finally here, I was able to get the car across and be under budget. Now that one surprisingly didn't end up being that bad, and this next one too really surprised me. My top solution was already actually working really well here. I was able to get the pickup across, although I noticed that the police car was struggling a little bit in the middle. It seemed like these centerpieces really liked the brake on me, so I decided to reinforce these up with some steel diamonds here, and giving this a shot, I was able to get a lot further, although I still ended up braking on the right side here. So with a few more diamonds, I was hoping I'd get this all supported, and you see I got the pickup across here, and I was also able to get the police car over, and with this, it was getting a little bit further, although I was still shattering this vertical support. So I went ahead with my little chain fix here, and you can see this did do the trick, and I was able to get the police car across, but again, I was only a little bit over budget, and I wanted to see if I could get this down. So I replaced the center of my diamonds with wood, and I also got rid of this diamond in the middle and replaced it with a single piece of steel. Now I was hoping by moving this up a little bit that the police car would be gentle enough on it, and this actually did seem to work. This design was $46 over budget, so to get that down, I just took the steel a little bit up here, and this virtually made no difference, but let me be under budget and beat that level. And now moving on to over the boat here. For this one, my original solution was at least holding it together, but it pretty much broke right away. Now one idea that I had was smoothing out things a little bit here, and you can see me copying that over to the other side as well. With the new road design, I wanted to try reinforcing this again, and you can see me starting out using this under support structure. This looked pretty strong to me, but the road didn't really seem to want to support this. I tried even using some diamond roads like this to hold it all together, and while it's sort of working, there always ended up being something under a lot of stress, and pretty much as soon as the truck touched it, it would end up shattering. So you can see me clearing off my design here, and what I wanted to try doing was going for an over arch design. And you can see just putting this down here, the arch doesn't really even want to support itself. Now the beauty of this is by attaching it to roads, it should want to hold itself together here, and although normally you want to use a rope for this, what I'm going to try doing here is using long strands of wood as my rope. Now trying this out, it sort of was holding itself together, although it wasn't doing it very well, but just by adding in some extra pieces of wood to make things shake a little bit less, I actually had it standing on its own for once here. And the truck was able to get on it more than it was able to get on those other bridges, although it still ended up breaking on me. So I tried using some extra pieces of steel to support this a bit better, although it was still clearly struggling a lot. And I tried supporting to the arch instead here, but even this just messes up the weight distribution. It really doesn't want to work very well. And I thought that maybe the problem was my weird shaped road, so I tried making it into a shallow arc, and I wanted to try supporting this up instead. Now you can see trying this out, the center road ended up breaking on me, and just by adding in a few extra pieces of wood here, I was able to keep that all together. Now once again though, the arch ended up breaking on me when the truck got on it. I realized if I wanted this design to work, I was gonna need to double up the arch. So here you can see me making it a bit shallower, and since I have 4 pieces of steel, I have just enough that what I can do is add on a second piece of steel like this and double that up. It's really shallow though, and I was kind of concerned that this wasn't really gonna get me anywhere. But you can see now I'm just adding in my long strands of wood again to keep this all together, and just by tying this all together, I wanted to see how it would look. And the first thing that I noticed is it was under a lot less stress than before, and although it ended up breaking again in about the same spot, this was easily corrected with a few pieces of road. With this design, I was able to get the truck fully on the bridge for once, and you can see here by adding in some reinforcing diamonds on the bottom, I wanted to see if I could get more towards the middle. Now this was looking really good here. I was able to get that center rope to end up breaking, and I figured that just by doubling it up like this, I should be able to do pretty well. Trying this out though, there's a lot of weight, and when it swings down, it ends up snapping the bridge. So I added in a few extra pieces of wood here to keep them from dangling so much, and this time I had some better results. I was nearly getting to the center of the bridge before I ended up breaking, so I decided to just keep doubling more stuff up here, and this time I was able to touch that center piece before it ended up breaking. So for a little extra support, I decided to add in one like this, and this time you can see me cresting the middle here and actually making it onto the other side. This though couldn't be easy, and unfortunately it did still end up breaking over here. So I decided to make that slope a little bit more gradual, and giving it a shot here, I was able to crest over, and this time nothing ended up breaking, and it actually seemed to work. So for level 9 here, I realized that my original solution was a little bit more complicated than it needed to be, and I could brace down to the rocks and actually do a lot better. Now some of it was going to stay pretty similar, and part of that here you can see was the support over on the left. Now it did end up breaking, but I figured that by adding in some diamonds, I'd probably be able to get it to work here. I definitely improved things, but I was still breaking a lot, and it seemed like no matter how much support I ended up adding in, there always seemed to be a problem. So what I wanted to try doing here was limiting how much I needed to support, and instead bracing down to the rocks below. Now, there was a lot of distance to travel to those rocks, and originally this was kind of breaking a lot on me. So what I wanted to try doing was using all of my steel to support that left side of the bridge, and you can see me optimizing that first support that the car rides on. This almost seemed to work, but the steel ended up breaking on me, and that was kind of a bad sign. And I figured that by making it even more straight, I'd be able to get a more direct approach here. Now once I had that in place there, I had to add in a lot of extra roads to support the rest of this, and the issue with that is they are very heavy. I barely was able to keep that steel from breaking on me, but I still was a little bit too weak here. So I tried adding in a few extra pieces of supporting road, but now that steel was breaking on me a lot, and I kind of got caught in the spiral of adding on more and more support. And to make this work a little bit better, I wanted to use one piece of steel closer to that center rock and use another piece of steel where I originally had it. To have this reach though, I had to add on some roads to kind of act like a foot here, and these did seem to work pretty well to distribute that load. But with that done, now it's time to move on to the last level, and on this one, you can see that my original solution isn't horrible, although it does end up breaking on me. Now, of course, here I could do a lot of bracing directly to the rocks, and this ended up saving me a lot. Now, unfortunately, the road did end up breaking for that yellow car, but you can see the green car actually made some decent progress here, and basically by getting rid of some extra pieces of steel that ended up being unimportant, I was able to get both cars across and pretty easily beat this level as well. And just for fun here, I turned off the mod, and you can see just how little stress there actually is on these bridges. It's been a little while since I've done a Polybridge challenge, but if you guys want to see another one of these, definitely make sure to let me know down below. And of course, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and otherwise, till next time.